Hello and welcome to Thursday Night Talk. This is a show where we discuss the week in Humboldt, the local issues and the local personalities with the local personalities. I'm Talvi Fried. I'll be your local host for the next hour. Today we've got a very knowledgeable guest. Welcome Congressman Huffman, the U.S. Representative for California's 2nd Congressional District since 2013. A member of the Democratic Party, Huffman represented the 6th District in the California State Assembly from 2006 to 2012. He chaired the Assembly Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee and the Assembly Environmental Caucus. He was elected to Congress in 2012 with more than 70% of the vote and continues being a favorite of the voters out here at least. His congressional district covers the North Coast from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Oregon border. Welcome, Congressman Huffman.
Well, thank you, Talvi. I know you were thinking about which adjective to apply before my name, and I'm glad you settled on knowledgeable. That's a good one. I like that.
Yes, yes. Well, you are very knowledgeable. I've appreciated your openness with media, so I'm very glad you're on the show. We, of course, also have 4th District Humboldt County Supervisor Natalie Arroyo, who will be kind of chiming in more near the end because let's face it, Congressman Huffman, a lot is going on right now.
Yeah.
The elections are coming up. You've come out with a new congressional, or as part of a new congressional task force. We've also got some industry shifts happening in the business realm, environmental realm, all of that. So I know we don't have much time, though. Let's start with something that kind of came out very, very recently. The congressional task force, which it's Stop Project 2025, which I'm not sure exactly what role you have in it, other than I know your name's attached to it.
Yeah, so I can tell you a little bit about that. Let me first tell you about Project 2025. This is not anything that I've come up with. This is something that a partnership of over 110 very strongly right-wing groups led by the Heritage Foundation has come up with to provide a policy roadmap, basically. They call it their war plan for a second Trump administration. And so as Republicans are winding up with their convention this week, you may hear about their platform, which has been, kind of workshopped and finessed a little bit. But if you want to see what they really would try to do in a second Trump administration, Project 2025 is that. It is a 920-page, very specific war plan that covers every part of our government, that would make dramatic changes to not just government institutions and policies, but really to each of our lives in some profound and controversial ways.
So there's a good reason to stop that project. It sounds like, from what I've read of it, it does sound like they literally took the pages from the Margaret Atwood novel, and at least I don't know if it's noticed, but I am very concerned about women's health care and ability for sovereignty, for personal individual sovereignty, and for everybody's personal individual sovereignty.
Well, Project 2025 is a sweeping power grab in all of those spaces. It would exert unprecedented control over women and women's bodies and their healthcare decisions. It would dust off these old morality codes from the 1870s under what they call the Comstock Act and use that to do everything from monitoring women's menstrual cycles to absolutely imposing what would function like a nationwide abortion ban, and a lot more, maybe limiting access to contraceptives and more. So in that space of individual and personal freedoms, it's really, really extreme. It's also extreme when it comes to our democracy because it would break down a whole bunch of checks and balances that have historically limited presidential power and made it accountable. And instead of that, they would make every agency of the federal government directly reportable and controllable by Donald Trump. And he would be exercising that control and power with the benefit of this new absolute immunity that the Supreme Court has given him. So here is a guy who says he wants to be dictator on day one, wink, wink, not really joking. Here is the blueprint by which he could essentially do it. And the Supreme Court has basically given him the cloak of immunity so that he has nothing to lose. That's why many of us are so alarmed by Project 2025 and are trying to shine a bright light on it, bring it out of the shadows so people understand it.
Is there a plan for the Democrats of the US that's a counter plan to Project 2025? Which specifically you also came out recently and, well, you didn't fully sign off on this, I believe, is what I read, though there is talk of the DNC asking Biden to please step down and let somebody else into the position of potential president. So any plans from the Democratic side for either who would, instead of Biden, who would run, and would there be, what's the plan then if not that? Because
Yeah,
usually a potential president comes in with, and this is what I want to see during my presidency,
sure.
which I don't think Biden's done yet.
Yeah, so look, the plan to stop Project 2025 starts with our most powerful tool, which is public opinion. When people learn about what is in this extreme document, they want nothing to do with it. And so, by far, the most important and urgent thing we can do is make Project 2025 part of the national conversation right now, and certainly in the next 90 to 100 days, so that the voters of this country are fully informed about what would happen in a second Trump presidency. And we're doing that in all sorts of ways. We're working with dozens of outside groups and scholars and experts to take this 920-page manifesto, which nobody has time to read, right? And to try to make it digestible and understandable for people. And I think we're making some headway in that regard. People are talking about it. I'm told that 2 weeks ago, Project 2025 actually passed Taylor Swift in terms of the most talked about thing on the internet. So that was not the case 2 months ago. Nobody knew what Project 2025 was. And now there's quite a buzz about it. So we're just going to keep that up. We're going to have all kinds of public facing forums and briefings and a hearing in September to make absolutely sure that everyone understands this thing and why it has to be taken seriously. Now, if in the unthinkable scenario Donald Trump wins and this actually starts rolling out, yes, there are some contingency plans to fight it, but that's not an ideal scenario because if Democrats don't have the White House, if we may not control one or both houses of Congress, you're left with basically litigation and things like that. And that's a worrisome scenario. So we certainly would prefer to defeat it now before the election and then go to work passing some new laws and reforms to make sure something like Project 2025 never sees the light of day in the future. That's our plan. You asked about President Biden. There's a lot of moving parts right now. It's overwhelming. But the truth is, we're having a difficult conversation about whether President Biden should stay at the top of the Democratic ticket. And I have stopped short of calling him to step aside, but I have been very clear in acknowledging we've got a very serious problem. You have to be kind of willfully naive to not acknowledge the problem. The polling is terrible. It's gotten a lot worse since the disastrous debate performance. And I think there's a growing concern that with Biden at the top of the ticket, Democrats cannot win. And so suddenly the looming specter of Project 2025 gets a lot more real. So these things are interrelated, they are connected. My hope is that in a matter of a few short days, we should be able to resolve the issue of who's at the top of the ticket, or at least whether President Biden is at the top of the ticket. Then there's likely, if there's a change, there's likely to be somewhat of a process in the next few weeks where Vice President Harris and others who are likely candidates to replace him would compete in an abbreviated process, and we would go to the convention and select our ticket. Convention's in late August.
So there is some worry about, I mean, I imagine that pretend I'm non-political entity here, though if
Yeah,
just strategically speaking, if you're a Democrat, then you want the person who's running for president to win.
of
And
course.
as history has shown, women running for the presidential seats tend to be threatened really badly, make it really. I'm not saying I don't want to see a woman president. I
Yeah,
do, though I want somebody, if I were on the Democratic side, hypothetically, I would want somebody who's absolutely going to win. And so who are, other than Kamala Harris, who vice president, um, what other candidates should be on people's radar right now coming from the
yeah.
Democratic side?
Sure. Well, you're right. Winning is what matters. It's the only thing. That's the only reason we're having this conversation. It's the only reason that we would make a change. And I personally believe that Vice President Harris is far and away the most likely replacement candidate at the top of the ticket. You mentioned history. We don't have a lot of history of women running for president,
No,
let alone, being actually on the ticket. The last time, the only time it happened, the woman won by something like 4 million votes in the popular vote and lost in a very controversial narrow electoral college defeat. So the idea that women can't win and that we can't have a woman president, I don't accept that for a minute. All of the polling suggests that Kamala Harris, especially if she's paired with a strong running mate, could beat Donald Trump. And more polling to that effect comes out almost every day. So I think there's a path to Democrats winning. I personally think that the best path would be with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, and then someone like maybe Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania. But we can absolutely, this is a very winnable election. The Republican nominee is a convicted felon, an adjudicated sex predator, a guy that admits he wants to be a dictator, and he's got this Project 2025 manifesto ready to go, and it scares the bejesus out of just about anyone who understands what's in it. So this is a winnable election. We're just trying in the next few days to figure out the starting lineup, really, so that we can get into the second half of this thing and win.
Uh, so not to, I know we don't have as much time. I appreciate your honesty there. The non-official endorsement of Vice President Harris, though.
Oh, you can make it official. I mean,
Oh, I love that. Okay,
I,
officially.
I've made no secret. If she's at the top of the ticket, she has my endorsement, and I'm going to work my butt off to make sure she wins and is the next president of the United States.
All righty. Appreciate your enthusiasm for being honest too, because I wasn't sure you were actually going to answer the question, and there you are
Yeah,
answering it. I like
yeah.
that. There are to completely switch. I mean, more towards local politics. So you did have your hand in a, was it $6 million environmental grant that either went to the salmon industry, or it was just an overall general, like, I
Are you
cannot.
talking about the disaster relief?
There is that one, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly worked to get that money out the door. It's been approved. It just takes too long to get disaster relief out to the people that were hurt by the salmon closures. So we are working constantly on that. You may be referring to some federal grants that we continue to get for salmon restoration work up and down my district. And honestly, we've been bringing home so many wins with federal investments across the board. I would, I'm not sure which of them you would be referring to. There have been so many. So we are pumping historic levels of federal investments into restoring watersheds, into more resilient forests, into restoring the Klamath River, and a bunch of other really important salmon rivers. Dam removal on the Klamath is done. It's just really cleanup at this point. The river is flowing freely, and we're going to keep providing federal funding to restore the riparian habitat and do the other watershed-wide work that needs to be done to bring that river back to life. So there's so much going on in this space, and it's unprecedented, really. But yeah, I think you're probably referring to one of a whole bunch of different.
One of a whole bunch. I know there was a lot out there about it,
Yeah.
which is, as a Californian, there's a reason I live in California, and it's because of the environment, of
Yeah.
the natural world. And I think most people, well, maybe that's a grandiose statement, though I think a lot of people out here agree with that. It's one of the beautiful parts of life is that we live on this planet. Um, so to sideways into another industry that's, I mean, it's years down the line, though, the offshore wind company that's going to be coming out here. I mean, it seems like everybody's got a finger in this pot here, and I like to pretend that somebody is just tuning in on the radio or on TV and they've never heard of this before. And they're offshore wind. What does that mean
Yeah.
for Humboldt County? What does that mean for Humboldt County? Because a lot of
Sure.
people there's misconceptions about, oh, there's going to be, thousands of jobs next year,
Yeah.
or there's going to be only jobs for a short time, and then lots of factors about the environmental impact. So please take it away and
Sure. Yeah. Well, if you ask me what it's going to mean for Humboldt County, I think it's the best thing to happen to Humboldt County in 50 years at least. And there has been ever since the logging and milling and associated jobs and economies around the timber industry, were dramatically reduced decades ago. Um, it's been a struggle to find something that provides that kind of economic stability and prosperity, and ideally something that's sustainable, that won't just kind of boom and then bust like that particular industry did. So offshore wind is the answer, in my opinion. It is going to be ongoing. It's going to be something in the order of 5,000 permanent, good paying union jobs associated with not just the offshore wind floating platforms that will be 20 or so miles off the coast of Humboldt County, but the entire supply chain, all the different industries that support the assembly of these massive offshore wind structures and the manufacturing of them and assembling of them here in Humboldt County, but for the entire West Coast potentially. So that's why we are modernizing the Port of Humboldt, and we've gotten a federal investment of $426 million to make that happen, to begin the process of repurposing that old industrial site there at the Samoa pulp mill and make it something that services the entire offshore wind industry. That's where a lot of those jobs are going to come into play. And they're going to be jobs that have apprenticeships, that have tribal partnerships. The best thing that I can think of for this economy, and helps us meet our climate goals at the same time. So I'm very excited about it. I suspect Supervisor Arroyo sees it the same way. And, we just got to keep pushing ahead and making it happen. It won't be next year. It won't be 2 or 3 years from now. All of this is going to take time. The redevelopment modernization of the port is going to take some number of years. The wind developers have won the auctions so that we know who the developers are, but they haven't yet settled on the exact technology and all of the environmental reviews and other things. The other kind of pacing item here is making sure that we have the energy transmission available to move all this clean electricity from Humboldt County out to the rest of the state. And that's going to take a few years too. But I think you're going to begin to see some activity in the next couple of years. It's going to evolve and increase. And within the next decade, I think we should realize the full measure of this exciting opportunity.
So I mean, that's incredible. There's a lot more to it, and I know there's a lot more to it. There is opposition out there that says, "Oh, it's environmentally damaging. We're going to destroy the coast. Uh, it's going to be, man-made versus nature-made." Though I don't think people realize that most of the
Mhm.
bay is man-made at this point. It is held up with
What? I'm
structure.
sorry.
Most of the bay, Humboldt Bay, is actually kind of man-made at this
Oh,
point, or has a heavy hand with
yeah.
humans digging it out, dredging it, all of this. Though,
Yeah.
what do you have to say to the people who are maybe a bit more old school? They've been here a while, they've seen an industry come, it looks so flashy, it looks so nice. Is it just a monorail? Like in The Simpsons, that's like, oh yeah, let's build this nice flashy thing, and then it's just going to collapse. And all these investors are going to go away. Because we did see that with the legalization of the marijuana industry in a lot of ways, where everyone was expecting, oh, maybe we will get all this tax money now. Maybe we will get this.
Yeah.
And instead, small farmers, that illegal industry really kept the economy afloat. I hate to say it, but, uh, so what
Well,
would you
I
say to
look, I
people who
agree.
feel that way?
Cannabis has certainly not been the economic answer to everyone's dreams. Um, but I do think that this offshore wind is different and is in many ways just a lot better than any other opportunities that have come along. Clean energy is the future. I mean, if you had to bet on anything right now, just given what we know about the climate crisis, about our need for electricity, including to power the transportation sector that is getting electrified, to power artificial intelligence and other things that are going to be an increasing amount of our economy, there's just no way around it. You're going to need these kind of projects. So to those that are opposed or are concerned, I don't dismiss anyone's concerns. I want to listen to them. I want to engage with them. If anything, I want to do a better job of bringing some of the tribal voices in particular into the conversation with federal agencies and with these wind developers and everyone else, because their voices need to be heard. They've seen a lot of things come and go too, that often end up making money for other people while dumping impacts on them, the Klamath Dams being like a prime example of that. And I can totally understand why they don't want to let that happen this time around with something like offshore wind. So, personally, I am committed to making sure that it doesn't happen that way, to making sure that they are at the table, that their voices are heard. I think all the concerns, all the serious concerns that I've heard to date are resolvable. I haven't heard any fatal flaws here, but what it does mean is we got to do the hard work of doing the studies, of uh, being transparent and inclusive and getting it right. The last thing I want to do, no one's going to ruin the coast. That's just not going to happen. No one is going to wreck our salmon fisheries. I care deeply about those things and work with them, work with our salmon advocates and tribes and everyone else on salmon all the time. We're just not going to let that happen. We can have both of these things. We're not going to let this happen in a way that harms whales or impacts sacred tribal sites or anything else. And tribes are going to be uh, to the maximum extent possible full partners in this thing going forward. That is my ideal.
I'm glad you mentioned that you are bringing in, the tribal governments, and because that's a huge part of the community, and I feel like they do get lost sometimes. Not so much in Humboldt County, though. What happens in Humboldt County oh, I don't want to use the term trickle down, but literally the water trickles down elsewhere. So what we do here with our fisheries and
Yeah.
oyster beds and the environmental impact here affects all of California, because that's just how watersheds work and river systems and all of that. So I'm glad you mentioned, those who have been here for generations and generations and generations and more generations, because it's about time that they got us, I mean, it's their table.
Yeah,
Like, it's about
absolutely.
time they get a voice at the table that, they built.
They deserve to be part of the upside of offshore wind in a big way, and I think they will be. I think this could be great for all of the tribes in our region. But I want to make that official. I want to formalize it. I want to create binding commitments, things that meet their concerns and provide assurances to them. And, that starts with really meaningful consultation, which we are absolutely going to make sure happens.
So there are interesting rumors that get floated around, such as, the feds or the county or somebody spent a lot of money to send a whole group of people over to Massachusetts to visit a wind
Mhm.
farm, and that, oh, they may have had a barbecue. Is this I was there. It's but well, not
You're
at
gonna
the
go all the way to Massachusetts, you should probably have a barbecue. I
I
mean,
did not go to Massachusetts, but there was a barbecue where quite a lot of people happened to be involved in the offshore wind thing, which it was one of the I guess I'll just say this and share this story with you, and then you can react how you'd like. Though it
okay.
was one of the few times that I have seen a representative from practically every industry in Humboldt County, from tribal communities, from different groups, all discussing the same project. And
Yeah,
so I've heard rumors about different things of like, oh, that's a lot of money to be spending on this. Though getting people to show up is a huge part of everything. So I wish I went to Boston and got to explore everything. I'm excited about. I like big machinery. It makes me happy on the inside. It's like some innate thing. It's like I don't want an oil rig in Humboldt, but if I go to Texas, I want to go check out an oil rig. One of those things. So I just want to ask, how have you seen the community reactions? Because you probably, I mean, I'm sure you get emails that they probably get filtered a little bit, but there's both negative and positive. Though, how are you feeling the community is reacting to what seems like extravagance? The numbers that are happening out here are in billions of dollars for the offshore wind. It's a number that most people who are low income, middle class incomes can't fathom.
yeah. So a couple things. I haven't heard about the clam bake or the barbecue or whatever happened, with the folks that went to Massachusetts, but the fact that everybody, throughout the business community and in different um, groups and sectors are talking about this and thinking about ways they can be involved in it, that's appropriate because it's going to be that big. There's going to be a value chain and a supply chain to support this industry that probably has economic ripple effects throughout the region and maybe even throughout the state. There are people in the Bay Area and Southern California that will be making components, hopefully, that are part of that value chain. So that's where, it's not just the initial number you see about what's being invested in Humboldt County. It's this entire economic system that will develop to support it for years to come. And I think it's a good thing. I really do. If somebody's got a better idea to grow the economy and create jobs and give young people something that they want to come back to Humboldt County and work on and put their careers into, I'm all ears. But this is the best thing that I've heard in a long, long time. And I think we would be kicking ourselves if we let it slip away. There are plenty of communities, by the way, that would love to have it. This opportunity to actually assemble these offshore systems and tow them out to the various places where they're going to be deployed There are a couple of other places on the coast that would do it if it didn't happen in Humboldt. But we've got the $426 million grant for our port. We've got the head start. We've got the commitment and the buy-in at this point from federal and state governments. Our local electeds, I think, are overwhelmingly in support of this. Unless that's changed, the last time I have talked to supervisors and council members and everyone else in the area, the support is pretty much unlike anything I've seen. So this is all good. The tribal concerns are the most serious piece of it that is kind of a red flag. We've got to do a better job addressing those tribal concerns, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time trying to make sure that we get that right.
Talvi, do you want me to add in a little bit about the funding source for the trip? It sounded like that might have been a consideration.
In a moment,
Okay, sounds
yes,
good.
I do. Yes, I absolutely do. Though I know I've only got Congressman Huffman for a few more minutes, and I want to give you, we have this thing called round robin.
Okay.
So of all the things that we've talked about or anything that we haven't talked about, you get about 3 to 5 minutes to just let any listener or person watching on channel 12 on our Access Humboldt channels or on YouTube, whatever whatever is going on in their head,
Yeah.
what do you want inside their heads now?
Okay. So are you gonna like cue me for that, or do you want to just
You just go for it. It's your
well,
time to step down.
I just have a soapbox here to say
You've
whatever I
got a
want.
soapbox.
Dang, that is profound. Well, my phone just rang, and that's been what's happening the last like 72 hours. I've hardly had a minute when the phone was not in my ear, because this is just probably the most momentous and historic moment that I've ever been a part of as a member of Congress. I mean, we are struggling to figure out the path forward on the Democratic ticket for president. We've got this Project 2025 thing out there swirling and on people's mind. The world is on fire. You got all of these controversies, and it's a heck of a moment for me to be in the arena representing you folks and others up and down the North Coast. But as demanding and sometimes overwhelming as that is, it is also exciting because if we get this right, if we can get past this terrible threat, honestly, that is looking at us, that could end our democracy, could take away our individual rights, could disrupt the entire rules-based international order. The stakes are that high. But if we get this right, we can move forward and do some really amazing and positive and exciting things. On climate change, we have started finally to change policy in this country in a way that's bolder and that's responsive to the moment. The offshore wind project in Humboldt is part of that. It's not the only thing, but it's part of it. On tribal relations and environmental justice, we're in a fundamentally different place than we've ever been before. We are providing more respect, more resources, more dignity to our tribal communities and lifting them up and just watching them thrive in many cases like we've never seen before. That's exciting for me. So this is a crazy moment. It's like the combination of the most high stakes, terrifying, and exhilarating time I could ever imagine. And for those who are confused or terrified by that moment and worried about how it's all going to end up, all I can tell anyone is to just stay engaged and try to do your part and think about the upside of getting this right, because to me, it's pretty darn exciting.
Thank you so much, Congressman Huffman. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure I'll see you around in the maybe not in person, but on TV or screen again somewhere sometime soon, because that's the modern world.
All right. Well, thank you. And somehow or another, I didn't get invited to this clam bake in Massachusetts. So you guys figure out who
Me
left
neither.
You were both invited to Oyster Fest personally. I'll get
All
you
right.
a VIP ticket. On me,
All right.
not on representation of anything else.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. When we come back from our break, we will be talking to Humboldt County 4th District Supervisor Natalie Arroyo. Hey, welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. I'm your local host, Talvi Fried. Here with me, we've got 4th District Supervisor of obviously Humboldt County, Supervisor Natalie Arroyo. We just spoke to Congressman Jared Huffman, who had a lot to say about what's going on. I'm always bummed when I only get a short amount of time because I'm like, well, can we talk about, the new fiber wire going through, because I was well prepared to discuss that, obviously. Though Supervisor Arroyo, you seemed very interested in the offshore wind.
Yeah,
and I know
absolutely.
that you seemed interested in sharing some of the facts and figures about perhaps the budget or where the funding has been coming from to manage all of what's going on with it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, unfortunately we did not have a clam bake. If anybody had a clam bake, I wasn't invited. So we did take a trip to the East Coast, and when I say we, I mean a delegation of a couple dozen people. It included elected officials, county staff, folks from the county's Workforce Development Board, and a number of other partners from like College of the Redwoods and other community partners who went to the East Coast. Thankfully, we were able to receive grant funding from the California Employment Development Department. So the County of Humboldt got a grant a little over a year ago to help understand the workforce implications of offshore wind development. So what it will mean for people as far as jobs and what other industries are tied to it. So the purpose of the trip was to really go to the East Coast and see some of the training facilities that have been set up, some of the educational facilities that are, in existence to help people prepare to be a part of this industry, and then what it actually looks like out in the real world. So both the port infrastructure and the wind turbines at sea. So it was a whirlwind trip. We were really just in Massachusetts for a couple days. We did eat meals, I will confess, but we were able to receive grant funding to fund that trip. And it was a pretty, I would say it was a bare bones trip because we went there and came back as quickly as we possibly could. It was a real whirlwind for all the participants, but it was really informative. And that was a Federal Workforce and Information Opportunity Act grant, but it was administered through the state of California. So that's what the trip, how it was funded and what it consisted of. It ended up being, just really eye-opening. It's always a whole different thing to see, photos or video and to see things in real life and kind of where they're situated in relationship to a town and a community. And the other thing that was really nice was we got a little bit of a chance to connect with community members there in Massachusetts and hear, their perceptions.
What were their perceptions?
Well, there were some people who felt that it was, there's similar to Humboldt County, that part of Massachusetts has really experienced a lot of boom and bust cycles. And so there was concern from community members that I had a chance to speak to just kind of in passing about it being, maybe concern that it would not be as sustainable as, or that it would be yet another boom. So I think that's a real concern here too, as we've seen a lot of, boom and bust cycles with the economy. The Massachusetts area had, historically had a ton of whaling, and when whaling died out, they had a glass making industry. And when that glass making industry really died out, they were kind of forced to think about what other strategies they could use. And fishing has seen a decline as it has here on the East Coast. What other strategies they could employ to really diversify their economy and have other working class jobs that weren't in those like defunct industries. So I think we're in a similar position in Humboldt County where we're looking at, timber and cannabis, which are still happening, but not on the scale that they were in the past, and they're not providing the, working class jobs that they once provided for people.
Speaking of working class jobs, I've noticed kind of a huge trend in Humboldt. This is kind of goes back to that question of a lot of people are hoping this is going to happen within a year or two, where there's going to be, the blue collar jobs. There's going to be a industry that trains you as you go instead of forcing you to go to one of the colleges or universities out here. And they're kind of dried up right now. I will admit, it seems like that there's not a lot of blue collar. I know a lot of people who are, they have 3 or 4 jobs, but they aren't making any real money. They don't have health insurance. They're doing the hustle culture, which I was hoping would go out of style, and it has done nothing but just keep going. What other industries are going to be tied to this, and how quickly can we start seeing them? Because
so I mean,
multitudes of industries happening.
I think maybe the message needs to be more clear that this is 5 to 10 years from any big influx of jobs at a minimum. So I think that, when the Harbor District has been doing outreach about that, I think they've been trying to, give a 5 to 10 year time frame. And I'm not sure, that message has gotten out to the community. From what you're saying, it sounds like it hasn't. That people are thinking, there'll be a job in this industry tomorrow. There are some opportunities for people who are doing highly specialized technical work, like understanding the, bathymetry, which means the underwater, like mountain ranges on the seafloor, essentially the topography of the seafloor. People who are, really great at analyzing that, or have a lot of technical skills in engineering, or design of, very complicated maritime systems, that kind of thing. Those specialists are, I think finding opportunities in this sector, but for most of us, it wouldn't be, a job we could walk in the door and get right now. So there's, highly, highly technical work that's happening for the next several years. The California offshore wind, the strategic plan, I had to think about the words for that, was just adopted by the California Energy Commission. So there is a robust plan that talks about how the state of California will be involved in this industry and what those planning goals are. Each state will really push for their own goals around renewable energy in this type of sector, offshore wind specifically. And then they will work to develop all of the related infrastructure that needs to be built in line with that. So what we will likely see happening parallel to the monitoring of the seafloor and some of the other things that those offshore wind developers are doing is the state of California going out for proposals for construction companies to start doing the build out of the grid and the transmission infrastructure, which is a really big part of the puzzle. And right now we know that the plan is to bring power onshore here in Humboldt County and then transmit it from here over land to other customers, because we don't have enough of a customer base for all that power. And that is a really good, I think, thing for us when it comes to jobs in construction, and to ensure that our own, energy is as renewable as possible, and that we receive some local benefits from that energy production. So that's one good thing. In the grand scheme of things, I'm happy to see that. And that'll be kind of moving forward in the next few years, probably, more like the 5 to 8 year range. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I feel like part of my job is just being a student of the offshore wind industry and working to understand it and to understand all the moving pieces when it comes to energy
production and, sale and transmission. Which speaking of that latter part, when this is built, will everyone's energy bills go down? And will the county be getting funds from that surplus energy that we're sending off elsewhere?
In short, I don't think it will have a direct impact on the cost of energy, but one of the things we're exploring and one of the things I'm working on is developing, a mechanism to get funding through this process called community benefit agreements or community agreements, that developers or people who have an impact on our community as far as that, development, whether that's the transmission infrastructure, the offshore wind turbines themselves, or other components, those will all fundamentally change our community in certain ways. And one of the things that's become a prevalent part of this discussion is how do the communities that are impacted benefit from this. One of the ways that I would like to see us benefit is by having some reduced rates, but that's not going to come with the sale of the energy to our customer base, essentially. That would come through some form of community benefit agreement or other mechanism. So I think that's still being worked out. I think the short answer is that we can't necessarily depend on it lowering our energy rates in the near future, but we could find another way to make that happen. And we are looking at that. Redwood Coast Energy Authority is exploring that as well. It's just, unfortunately, it's not really the way that the power market works. The electrons get kind of put into the grid, and then it's not like the wind energy generated here will directly be sold to people in Humboldt County. That's it's just sort of not how the juice works.
Interesting. I haven't seen this full plan. I would love to see it, and I think a lot of other people would, about what the strategic plan is for the next 5, 10, 15 years, because then there suddenly are these other aspects, which I feel is much more your terrain, being supervisor out here versus Huffman, who's got a little bit of a larger scope to deal with currently. While right now, let's focus on Humboldt County and what are we going to do about because there's going to be people coming from out of the area to work, and where are they going to go? Where are they going to live? It comes down to housing so often, and I know it feels like beating a dead horse, but someone's got to resuscitate this horse, throw some lightning, become Dr. Frankenstein, because that horse needs to move in order for the rest of society to go with it.
Well, right now, part of what we're urging is for some of the hires to happen within the local community, and the developers that are here have, hired some local individuals to, which I think is smart because people have local relationships already. So, those aren't, in this case, people needing new housing. They're folks who already live here and have roots here. There are going to be some folks from out of the area, both temporary and longer term folks relocating to work in this industry. I think that's inevitable. There is both a shortage of really good paying, jobs for working people here, and ironically, an issue of supply in the labor force that almost seem like they're contradictory issues. But we have a lot of people who are permanently not employable, not job seeking, disabled or retired, or for whatever other reason not in the workforce. So interestingly, we are also looking to find the mechanisms that allow people to work here and have good working lives here. And we are kind of, as a county, supporting, like many other places, rural places, supporting a large population of people who do not work, but who still require public services. So that's an interesting kind of mix. I think we'll start to see some interesting data around that, but we don't really have it yet as far as this industry and how that will all kind of play out. So I don't know if I have all the answers for it. We'll certainly have, continue to have housing needs, and those are, projected to increase over time. And that's planned in a lot of our existing, our housing element of our general plan. and some other factors. I think we thought that, Cal Poly Humboldt would grow more and more quickly. But, we were anticipating growth in Humboldt County. And, if that's from a different sector and not from the university, or less so from the university, we'll still, have the projections for that in place.
Interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I hadn't mentioned anything about Cal Poly because I feel like that, I mean, each of these topics that we're discussing can be their own show. It can be their own 10-hour discussion, truly. Though, let's move on to what of the other factors, because we've only got so much time for you as well, and I think we need to have an offshore wind show, really.
I agree. I think it would be really interesting.
Yeah, you're absolutely invited to that one. You seem to know quite a bit, which is great. Though
I'm trying to soak it up. I would definitely say that you mentioned that you were interested in the offshore wind strategic plan, and your listeners maybe too. It's a dense document, but honestly, I find it pretty helpful. And people can find it by looking for the legislation that created it was Assembly Bill 525. So it's under the header of AB 525 Offshore Wind Strategic Plan. And a quick web search of that will pull it up. And it's a really interesting document. It also talks about what additional wind energy areas the state would like to see in the future, which there are more off the Humboldt and Del Norte coast that are in the hopper for perhaps future development. So it's helpful for people to understand the context of this, that it is a big and monumental change over the next couple of decades, which is the length of time of this strategic outlook.
awesome. To move on to more what people consider typically political. The elections are coming up in Humboldt County, where it's kind of been a very busy time on the national level. Milwaukee is so busy that there's small apps that are having outages because so many people are trying to use them at once during the Republican National Convention. And all of these actions that are happening seem to be very, very polarizing. And this is a small community. And I just like to always take time to remind people that, no matter what your beliefs are, we all do live around each other. We don't have to be mean to each other. We can discuss things nicely. Though, what are you expecting for this? Because you're the one who has to sit there and kind of take all of the public comments often. Are you seeing any trends that are either becoming more aggressive or just becoming more clear in their views of different aspects? Are you seeing people veer more towards certain topics than others?
I will say our last couple of meetings have been fairly straightforward, not terribly complicated items. So, I don't think we've seen the full impact of this being on people's radar yet, but I do believe that it'll be coming. Usually, the few months before November, every time there's an election, whether it's a, presidential year or, the alternating election cycle, either way, we see an uptick in, political speech that is a little bit more biting and more divisive, I would say. And I also think it's a time when people raise issues that are important to them. And so it's worth, kind of bracing ourselves, taking a deep breath and learning what we can about our community from that, because people come out and participate in the public process in a different way. They're either more motivated or more upset by what they're seeing. And that's, honestly good information for us to have as leaders in the community to understand that fully. But it does get hard. And, it's worth noting that our election cycle as supervisors is such that, this time around, we don't have anyone running in the general election who's a candidate because the elections were, the results were made available in the primary. So this time around, it's really just kind of absorbing like how national elections and local election issues, but that aren't related to, our board, are playing out. So it will be definitely interesting to see, just what comes up. It's always a fraught time, but worthwhile.
Yes, that's for sure. I'm a little, not that I want the debates to be dynamic. They don't need to be dynamic, but those were terrible debates. And I just remember back in the day, it was like Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, and they were both such energetic people. And so there were bars that would play the thing because we all thought it was a joke back then. And now politics has become what it is now, which it doesn't feel so jokey and funny anymore now that it's all like so real. I still think that there should be, Mystery Science Theater 3000 events for the upcoming debates, if there are any. Has nothing to do with anything, but it's a great segue for me to say, of all the things we've talked about today, you've got about 5 minutes. It's your turn for the round robin. So whatever people at home or driving in their car or whatever they've got in their heads, what would you like in their heads instead?
I really appreciated where you started with, or close to the beginning of the conversation with Congressman Huffman. There was discussion about, some of the river restoration and environmental restoration funding that he's been able to help bring to the community. And I want to, point out that there is a lot happening on that front. I've been but wanting to really bring forward some good news for people that's really legitimate and reflects something positive that's happening in our community. Not to be kind of Pollyanna about the difficult things we're facing right now as a nation, as a planet, as a community, but to provide that, look into some good things that are happening. And there really is, the county is working with several partners to help support an estuary restoration plan for the Redwood Creek watershed near Oric and the levee there. There are a number of restoration funded projects that are happening, on the Elk River and all around Humboldt Bay, and up in Prairie Creek. And, there's some good stuff happening. And then the dams coming out on the Klamath River is really something that brings me a lot of joy. So those are big environmental justice and environmental restoration projects that have been needed for decades that are finally really coming to fruition. And, I think that's worth celebrating. So I would urge people to, be aware that those are happening and, participate in the ways that they can in those projects and making them happen. The city of Eureka is doing some awesome stuff too, restoring creeks. So that's something that's a real particular passion of mine. I miss doing environmental restoration and watershed healing work. And it feels very important and like something you do as a gift to the future generations that come after you. And I'm grateful that I still get to be a part of it in one tiny little way.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for being part of the show. If there's anything else, say your piece, or we're gonna just wait until you're on the next episode that relates to your expertise. I appreciate you, 4th District Supervisor Natalie Arroyo. Thank you so much for being on the show. That is about all the time that we have today. We'll be back next week with another Thursday Night Talk. If you have topics or suggestions for the show, please email us at kzzh@accesshumboldt.net. And reminder, the show replays on Friday evening at 8 p.m. right here on KZZH 96.7 FM. You can watch the show on channel 12. It'll be replaying throughout the weekend. And if you're an internet fan, I am too, check out Access Humboldt's YouTube channel. We've got hours and hours and hours and hours of Thursday Night Talks just for your viewing pleasure. See you next Thursday.
Thank you. Have a good one.